Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we ask, what is life? It depends on the liver. I'm your host, Jeff Grizz Ulrich, and I'm joined as always by two excellent men, Hugo Panay and Josh Bradley. How are you gentlemen today?
I'm good, Jeff. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great.
I'm isolated in my room because everyone around me seems to be getting COVID, but more importantly, I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't break out into a full Bollywood number to intro the show. I was kind of expecting it, and now, I don't know, my energy has been brought down a little bit by that.
His piano's in the shop.
My piano's in the shop.
Yeah.
Actually, I used to have a piano, and then I was never playing it, so we gave it to my brother so that he can never play it.
Right. That's what you usually do with pianos, I mean.
It's a good thing to hang clothes on.
Yeah, or my niece loves to sit at it and then just, bang on it, and, that's good for a couple of minutes of entertainment. Well, so anyways, this week we are talking about a Indian film called ANDHADHUN, and
thank you for pronouncing it for me, because I did not know how to pronounce it.
Well, and I'm still not positive on that.
Give it to me again.
ANDHADHUN.
ANDHADHUN, okay.
Yeah, I think.
That sounds right, sure. Sure.
Which is different from how I originally thought it was pronounced, which was ANDHADHUN.
That's how I've been doing it in my head, because I didn't remember how to spell it, so every time I look for it on Netflix, ANDHADHUN.
It's very easy to spell phonetically.
ANDHADHUN, okay.
But yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about this week, but it's been a few weeks since the three of us got together to talk movies. So we're going to do what we've been doing on recent episodes, where we talk about what we've been watching, and usually it's what have we watched in the last week. Now it's what have we watched in the last month?
3 weeks, month?
It's like 3 weeks. It's been like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, Hugo, you want to kick us off, bud?
Okay, I'm not going to go through all of it. I kind of didn't even write down all of it because it was too much. I've had a lot of alone time, like because of isolation and other stuff, and just like everything being shut, and you can't really go places right now in Italy because it's not shut, but you shouldn't.
I just love that Hugo's been talking about isolation a whole bunch, and the lighting in his room is very dark right now.
Yeah,
like you've locked yourself away.
I'm in a bunker. Actually, this is just a fake background. If you look that way, I'm just in some bunker underneath the ground. So I'll start by saying that I did watch a few recent movies. I watched, obviously, The Matrix Resurrections twice. I loved it. Let's not get into discourse about that movie because it's been so horrible. But I had a great time, and I understand that it's not for everyone, but it's kind of exactly what I would have wanted from a Matrix sequel. I don't know. I thought it was awesome. If you want to listen to me talk about it, I did an episode of Large Popcorn about it. Shameless plug.
Large Popcorn Podcast, hosted by Christian Macias. Go check it out.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Friend of the show.
Yeah. I also watched West Side Story, which despite
Spielberg or OG?
No, Spielberg.
Okay.
I wasn't going to watch both. That's too much. That's too much. That's too many musicals for me. So despite me not being into musicals, I don't know. I think narratively I didn't really care all that much, but in terms just of visual and the way everything is put together, it's just Spielberg at his best. It just looks incredible. Every number is so well organized and shot and choreographed, and I don't know. I thought it was incredibly well made, even though it's not my favorite Spielberg movie, just because I'm not necessarily that into the genre. But I thought it was great.
It's
you guys
so
have both
good.
seen it, right?
I haven't seen it yet.
It's so good. I've seen it twice in theaters. Twice.
I really want to see it, and I wanted to share it with my girlfriend. I wanted to take her to go see it, and she has not seen the original West Side Story, and despite really loving musicals, she's not that excited about the idea of going to see this one. And so we just haven't gone to see it. Like, no, it's going to be great. It's Steven Spielberg. It's West Side Story. You're going to love it. And so
you're both going to love it. Yeah, it's so good. I can't believe she hasn't seen it yet, or that you guys haven't pulled the trigger on that yet.
We've been pretty busy the last few weeks.
Sure, fair. We all have. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know some people. Most people I've heard talk about it have agreed with what you guys said, that it's very, very good. But I don't know too many people who say it's among Spielberg's best. What do you guys think?
I think it's among his best in the last like 20 years.
Oh, okay.
I think, among his best, maybe not his number one, but I mean, I'd put this up there against his filmography.
I really like The Post. I have a weird, for some reason, I really, really enjoyed The Post, which I think a lot of people kind of saw it and was like, oh, that was good.
I really enjoyed The Post.
I really, really like The Post.
I mean,
for some reason, it really worked for me.
So his 2002 was Catch Me If You Can and Minority Report, which I'm not going to compare these to West Side Story because those are two of the best. But like starting the clock there and saying the next 20 years after that, I ride from Munich.
Sorry.
I love Munich. I love Bridge of Spies. But other than like, I would put this up there with those. Maybe not up there with Munich because Munich's crazy good. But this is really
it's really good.
Really good. I really liked it a lot.
Regardless of whether or not I convinced my girlfriend to go see it, I am going to see this movie.
Yes.
So
it's excellent.
It's also like really worth seeing in theaters if
Absolutely.
it's safe and you're able.
Yes.
Because it is the visuals of it are a large part of why I think, at least personally, it's great. So, and also the sound obviously is fantastic. Then to begin the year, I decided to watch Train to Busan, the Korean zombie movie. Fantastic little action movie. I really enjoyed it. And then the day after, I was over at my dad's house and just randomly we put on this movie called Unstoppable, directed by Tony Scott, with Denzel. Really fun little movie. And then
one of Tarantino's favorites, by the way. Quentin Tarantino loves Unstoppable. Weirdly, randomly, he loves Unstoppable. Yeah,
I can see why. It's a really fun. It's a very dad movie, but it's fun. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to continue the meme, and I'm going to watch a third train-related movie to begin the year. So I watched Murder on the Orient Express, which had been the new one as well, not the.
What did you think of that
one? I thought it was fine. Like I think murder mysteries are always fun for me because I just really enjoy it as a genre. I had read the book as a kid, so I knew where it was going. But I thought it was not incredible, but a fun time.
Yeah, I thought it was very fun. From the trailer, I think I was expecting a little more from it, but it was still a really good movie, and of course, it's tough to top that kind of story. So, yeah.
Then I watched 4 different movies that because Christian, I wanted him to get into Twin Peaks, and because I think he would really enjoy it, and in exchange, I told him, just give me a list of 15 movies that I'm going to watch. And so I watch something you suggest and you watch something I suggest. So I've been watching some stuff that he suggested. I watched Pi, Francis Ha, The Lobster. That are movies that he suggested.
Those are 3 great suggestions.
Really great movies. I particularly enjoyed Francis Ha out of those 3.
I thought you might, yeah.
Yeah, just because it kind of fits into my general mood, I guess.
Also my favorite of those 3, yeah.
Outlook on life. Then I watched Joint Security Area, one of the early Park Chan-wook movies.
Oh, okay.
It's a movie about sort of a murder that happens on the border between North and South Korea and how sort of this investigation around it risks escalating tensions. But it's really a movie like about friendship. It's very hard to explain what it is, but I thought it was excellent. And finally, I went to see Scream, the new Scream movie, which I really, really enjoyed. I think it's my second favorite Scream movie. The original just cannot be touched, but
it never will
really,
be.
But I had really had a great time. And then the day after that, my girlfriend tested positive. We went to see the movie together, so I don't know.
So she was patient X for a whole bunch of people.
Ghostface got her sick.
Yeah, the theater was completely empty. It was just us 2 and a couple of other girls that were quite far back. So
remake the opening scene of Scream 2, where instead of Jada Pinkett Smith getting stabbed to death at the premiere of Stab, it's your girlfriend getting COVID at
just
the premiere
giving
of Scream
COVID
5.
everyone. Yeah, yes. pretty much.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the whole bunch of movies that I watched. What about you guys?
Well, Josh,
Grizz?
you go next. I guess I'll go in.
Please.
Yeah. So I have actually not seen as many movies since Christmas as I would have expected myself to do, because usually around the holidays I end up watching all of the Harry Potter movies, and then something will trigger me to start watching all of the MCU again. And this year I managed to not get sucked into that wormhole of rewatching movies that I've seen 1,000 times. So stuff that I watched since the last time we recorded. just a couple of days ago, I watched Belle, the new Mamoru Hosoda movie.
Yep.
It was good. It's a take on Beauty and the Beast, and I did not know that going in, and it's fine that you know that. I'm not spoiling anything with that. But it was really fun, really great music, and it was absolutely beautiful, but there's some problems with the story on that. Overall good, though. And then I saw Encanto, finally, which was another movie I had been saving to watch with my girlfriend, and then it exited theaters, and we never saw it, and so then it finally came to Disney+, so we watched that, and that was really fun. One that I wanted to talk to you guys about was Being the Ricardos.
What's that? I actually don't know what it is.
It's on Amazon Prime. It is the new Aaron Sorkin movie about the I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball.
A week in the production of the show, right. I Love Lucy.
A very important week in the production of I Love Lucy. And it was good, but I think I'm starting to see some of the cracks in Aaron Sorkin's directing that his writing can no longer save for me.
I haven't watched the movie yet, but I've heard that from a lot of people. Yeah,
I just think it was very good, but I am pretty certain that if it had been directed by someone else, then that would have only elevated Sorkin's writing. And as much as I love Aaron Sorkin, I would like him to go back to focusing on just the writing, and we'll put someone else, in the director's chair going forward, please.
Yeah. I haven't watched. I think I just said this. I haven't watched Being the Ricardos yet. I watched the first half hour over Christmas, and then that was 2 weeks ago, and I haven't finished it yet, which might be indicative.
That's a little telling. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't. I will watch it like this week.
It wasn't that it was awful. I enjoyed it. It was good, but it.
Yeah. I think it might be the next thing I watch, so I might watch that today or tomorrow, possibly. But I mean, it's probably going to get nominated for Best Picture. Like, Nicole Kidman will be nominated for Best Actress, so...
And that she might deserve. But the movie I don't think is Best Picture worthy.
So I will, because I do my Best Picture nominee YouTube videos every year, I will probably have to talk about that movie at some point. Kevin, can you get away, dude? For those watching on YouTube, you can see my cat Kevin making a cameo in the podcast. Hey,
I also watched Matrix Resurrections, and I thought it was very good. I don't know what the hate's about. Like, okay, we're not going to get into it. Don't Look Up. I watched that, which I kind of expected that at least Hugo would have watched, given its very obvious political commentary. You didn't want to watch Don't Look Up, Hugo?
I don't know. I feel like I've been hearing contrasting stuff, and then I heard the director saying, "Oh, if you don't like this movie, you don't care about climate change." And I was like, I don't know. Do I need to see this right now? Then my dad called me yesterday. He's still, quarantined with COVID. He's fine. He hasn't had any bad symptoms. But he called me yesterday and was like, "Oh, you have to see," because I gave him my Netflix password a few days ago because I was like, "Oh, you're isolated. We should share this. Why? There's no reason why you shouldn't have a Netflix account." And he was like, "Oh, I watched Don't Look Up. You have to see. This is the best movie in the last 30 years, he said. So I was like, sure.
Okay,
then
so
I have to see this just to see why my dad loves it so much.
I'm going to disagree with your dad.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm probably going to disagree. I disagree with my dad's movie takes all the time, but I just thought it was funny that he said that.
But I think that whatever you think about the actual quality of the movie itself, the topic, the subject matter, and some of the humor surrounding it, I do think that you would enjoy Hugo. And Josh probably would as well, because there's some legitimately humorous stuff to it. But it has a stellar cast, so I was a little disappointed overall because I don't know how you don't deliver a masterpiece with the cast they had involved with that. I also watched The Power of the Dog.
Meryl Streep plays the president, correct?
Correct, yes.
That's perfect casting, isn't it?
Well, The Power of the Dog, I got around to that one, and Josh and I talked about that being a obvious Oscar Best Picture,
probably one of 3 or 4 movies that has a chance for Best Picture winning right now. I'm not sure what chances are, but yeah.
I watched
that.
What
do you think of
it? I don't think I would say it's my favorite picture of last year. I thought it was very well made and very well performed, and the ending in particular is very subtle and delivers a very powerful ending that you're kind of like, oh, oh, that's what happened.
I can't remember if I've said this on mic yet, but like I didn't understand what happened in the final 10 minutes, and it wasn't until after the movie was over, I pulled up an interview with Cody Smith-McPhee, and the first question in the interview was in reference to what happens in the last 10 minutes, and I was like, wait, that happened in the last 10 minutes? I just watched it. I didn't know that happened.
So
that's how subtle it is.
That's my worry, is that ending is almost too subtle, that I think that a lot of people will overlook just how significant that ending is.
I put it on myself. Like, I think I should have been able to connect the dots, but, you know, they don't hold your hand.
What happened to me was, like, I'm not going to spoil it for Hugo, but in the credits, like, it was, the movie had ended, and I was in the credits, and I was thinking, like, wait a second. Oh. So, like, it wasn't until, like, the movie was over, and then I was, like, thinking back on it, like, oh, I get it now. So, I do recommend seeing that one, but then my two favorite movies of last year, I watched, like, back-to-back on New Year's Eve when I was isolating with COVID. And that was Come On, Come On, the Joaquin Phoenix movie.
Mike Mills.
Yep. And The French Dispatch, which ultimately was my favorite movie.
Yes.
Released in 2021. I loved The French Dispatch. So
awesome.
Beautiful. Classic Wes Anderson.
But in my letterboxd review, I wrote that it's the most Wes Anderson movie that has ever been Wes Andersoned, because it really is. I love that movie because I feel like you don't even have to understand like so many things go on, and I don't think you even have to understand what actually happens. Like, you just kind of settle into what it's showing you,
it's
and
a vibe.
Once you do, it's just a great time.
But yeah, so I really loved that. What have you watched recently, Josh? Since we probably hit most
real
of
quick
them.
Real quick on the French Dispatch before I get onto my list. I think that, like, I thought it was really good. I liked it. I didn't love it. However, with the caveat that pretty much every Wes Anderson movie I've ever seen, I needed like maybe 3 viewings to really start to dig into what it was doing. Where like the first viewing, I'm like, oh, this is really pretty, and then the second or third viewing, I'm like, oh, this is actually devastating.
Yeah,
hiding behind a pretty facade, you know, like Grand Budapest kind of wears that more on its sleeve. It's more overt in how it's devastating, but like all of his movies are pretty emotionally devastating, even though they seem kind of detached on the surface. Yeah.
I just want to say the reason I loved it is because one of the reasons I loved it is because Wes Anderson directs movies in a similar way to I think Aaron Sorkin writes them, in that like there's an assumption that the person watching it is just going to have to keep up, right?
Yeah.
And I respect that. Like he's making the movie the way he envisions it, with it doesn't seem like he has any concern for whether or not you actually follow exactly what he's doing. And that's like you said, sometimes you have to rewatch these movies. Like I watched Grand Budapest Hotel a couple of times, and the second time I watched it, it was much more emotionally impactful. And I loved it the first time.
Yeah. And I want to watch Rushmore now. I'm going to watch Rushmore this weekend. Stuff I watched. So older stuff. I watched The Holiday with my wife. Good movie. I watched Lethal Weapon for the first time.
What?
Doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up.
I had higher expectations. Like, I understand that it's like kind of the originator of a lot of tropes that I enjoy, so I can't really like hold it against it for seeming kind of like...
I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, and also like it's one thing. I mean, Mel Gibson has. There's a lot of reasons to not enjoy watching Mel Gibson on screen, you know, outside of the movie itself. But also, like, it's weird that he was ever like a sex symbol in the mid '80s, and like I don't know, it's hard to like wrap my head around. There's layers to me having problems with this Mel Gibson character and performance. And then I watched The Piano, which was like Jane Campion's most famous movie. And she's going to probably win Best Director this year for Power of the Dog. So I'm like, let me check out The Piano. I was underwhelmed by The Piano. However, I was also underwhelmed by The Power of the Dog on first viewing. And on second viewing, I think it's like one of the 3 best movies I saw last year. So, I don't know. Maybe I'd feel similarly about The Piano if I watched it again. The last like older movie that I rewatched was The Iron Giant. Katie, former guest, my current wife, has been like former guest, current wife, you know, current and future wife, and past wife. We don't watch as many movies together as like some of my other friends and their significant others. So Katie and I made a deal where I have a list of movies that are important it's important to me that she sees them at some point. So we're just kind of like,
right.
and vice versa. So we're just like kind of knocking our way through that list. And the first movie that we watched was The Iron Giant, and she cried. Awesome. So that's good to know. She's not a robot.
She's not a robot.
Yes. Newer stuff. I watched No Way Home. On my birthday, I went and saw No Way Home with my brothers and Katie, and it was really great.
That sounds
good
fun.
Movie. It was really fun, dude. Also, yeah. Okay, so this was my birthday, my 32nd birthday. We went to Red Robin, saw a Spider-Man movie, and then me and my brothers played Wii Sports and Mario Kart until 5 a.m. drinking beer and whiskey.
Is this 2006?
So I was either turning 32 or turning 14, but with booze. But either way, it was a great birthday. So
that sounds
Spider-Man.
Great.
I watched Don't Look Up. I think I liked it more than most people, but also, like, my biggest question is, who is this for? You know? Like, I feel like you're... I don't know. I don't know. It's okay. I watched Matrix Resurrections. I think it's awesome. Hugo, I'm happy for you. I think it's really good.
That was what I was thinking the entire time I was watching the movie. I was like, I'm just so happy for Hugo right now.
Yeah.
I liked the first half a lot more than the second half, but I definitely want to watch it again to kind of like, now that I know where it's going and everything.
I feel like the second half is a little overwhelming if you're not as in deep to Matrix lore as someone like me is. Like, if you've seen the sequels a lot, you've seen the Animatrix a few times, it all makes more sense. But I feel like those first like 50 minutes of the movie, for me, were perfection. Like the movie isn't as great as the first one. It's not even close to as great as the first one. But those first 50 minutes for me are just exactly what a Matrix sequel should be in 2021.
Well, I think it's definitely trying to do different things in the first one.
Yeah. And
then the second or third one. And, like, once you kind of see what it's trying to do, like, that's maybe why the second half didn't land as much for me. Because I wasn't clear on what it was trying to do, but, like, that's why I kind of watch it a second time, knowing where it's going. Real quick, we've talked about what films to remember we want to do moving forward. Next week is my pick, and not to spoil it, but watching the first half of Matrix Resurrections, I'm like, oh my god, what a great pick for me for my next film to remember. It's very, very apropos given the first hour of Matrix Resurrections. We can talk about that next week, though, in more detail. I also watched West Side Story twice in theaters. I know we already talked about it already, but wow, it's so good. And I rewatched the old one like kind of this week while I was half doing other stuff. And I was never like, I don't have much of a relationship with the old one, but the Spielberg one is like, as someone who doesn't have as much of a relationship with the old one, I think the Spielberg one is a massive, massive improvement. And that might be sacrilege for some people to hear, but you know, as a guy who's not as familiar with the old one, this new one's just like so clearly better in a number of ways. Hugo, you said you weren't like drawn as much like the story. I think the new one fixes a number of story problems from the original in terms of like pacing, in terms of the romance. It's more dramatic, it's more romantic, it's more tragic. Like everything is, and they kind of just did that by moving. I mean, they moved some stuff around and restaged a few songs such that like different characters now sing them. But like every change they make, I think is a massive improvement. So West Side Story, go see it. It's awesome. For me,
story-wise, with West Side Story, it was like the individual beats were all great, but then the way they connected to each other felt always like there was a beat missing. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I think it's a similar issue that I have just with many musicals where, they meet and then 5 minutes later, I would sacrifice my life for you, and the day after this whole grand thing. And I understand it's Romeo and Juliet. I get it. But I feel like that. No, I understand that. But I feel like that allegory when Romeo and Juliet was written is completely allegorical. And it's so distant that I don't feel that disconnect with it. But because West Side Story is essentially set in a real setting that I can relate to in some ways, that sort of skipping beats of emotional development, it just kind of...
It felt too rushed.
It makes me lose investment in the emotional arcs of the characters, even though I think the individual parts are absolutely fantastic.
Well, and of course, in Romeo and Juliet, the idea of a couple meeting and falling in love and and getting married right away is, of course, that's how a lot of marriages were done. It's like you met for the first time on your wedding day. Like, of course, yeah. I mean, so a lot more feasible in that time. So I can see why you'd have some hang-ups about that. What were you going to say, Josh?
Well, two things. Like, not to put on my English teacher hat, because I'm not an English teacher, but like I think some people, Romeo and Juliet is like a cultural touch point for love stories, and like some people mistake it for a story about true love, and it's not. It's a story about young love. And like they're kind of idiots for falling in love as quick as they do, and like that's that's in the text. Yeah, how Romeo and Juliet ends is a result of them being rash and irrational and emotional and that kind of stuff. But also like I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying that a lot of the complaints about the original West Side Story is in the romance and in the Tony and Maria characters. They are way less interesting than like Anita and Bernardo, for example, and like that's kind of.
I felt
that's tough. That's tough. And like in the new one, their romance works way better, at least for me, because of the way that Spielberg stages certain sequences, how he stages their meeting, how he stages Tonight. Like I buy the romance more because it's like I'm brought in more by the filmmaking, and also Rachel Zegler is a fucking revelation in that movie.
So
and like,
good. She's.
Good. I mean, like, all respect to Natalie Wood, but, like, holy crap, Rachel Zegler's, like, the second you see her on screen, you're like, oh my god, that's a movie star, And, like, Ansel Elgort does what he can, but, like, the Tony character has always been a really, really big weak spot of the show, is my understanding, at least. So, it is what it is.
He gets cancelled out when they sing together completely, because she's just so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay with me. Other new stuff. I watched The Lost Daughter, which is on Netflix, and will probably get Olivia Colman a Best Actress nomination. Written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal on her directorial debut.
Oh, wow.
And it's really good. It's kind of if you're a mom, it might be pretty anxiety inducing watching The Lost Daughter, but like an Uncut Gems level of anxiety inducing. But I thought it was very good. I watched Coda, which premiered at Sundance like a year ago at this point,
Apple
and
TV,
it's
right?
On Apple TV Plus, and that'll probably get nominated for Best Supporting Actor, I imagine, for Troy Kotsur, I think his name is. Extremely charmed by this movie. CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and it's about a girl who has deaf parents and a deaf brother, but she's a hearing person, and she, like, gets into her high school choir and that kind of stuff, so, conflict ensues.
So you enjoyed that one a lot?
I really enjoyed it. I think that, like, it's not really reinventing the wheel. It's a lot of stuff you've seen before. Not really that surprising, any of the story beats, but, like, it's extremely charming. And, like, I laughed out loud multiple times. I teared up multiple times. Not a whole lot of movies make me do both on multiple occasions, so I give it credit for that. But, yeah, really enjoyed Coda.
That's been on my list for a while to go back and watch, because it came out.
It was on my list, yeah. Yeah, it was on my list for, like, 9 months, and I finally got around to it, because, again, like, Oscars coming. It could get a screenplay nomination. It'll probably get a supporting actor nomination. Yesterday I watched Drive My Car, which is it's a movie out of Japan, and it's like the 6th movie ever to win the LA Film Critics Award for Best Picture, the New York Film Critics Award for Best Picture, and the National Society of Film Critics Best Picture. Only like 5 or 6 movies have ever won all 3, and all of them were nominated for Best Picture. It was like Goodfellas, Schindler's List, The Social Network, that kind of stuff. Drive My Car's good. It's just, yeah, it's quite the list, but, it's good. It's just a, 3-hour, extremely understated, internal character study kind of thing. It's good, but, it's...
You don't think it's going to be for everybody?
It's not going to be for everybody. No, it's kind of dense. Mood. It's kind of dense, but it's good. And then I also, last night I watched The Tragedy of Macbeth, written and directed by one Joel Cohen, starring one Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. And it was just, yeah, it was great. And then I saw Scream. I saw Scream on opening night with my wife, and it was awesome. And it was everything I wanted from a Scream movie, and I'm very satisfied.
Well, good. So, yeah, these last few weeks, we've been quite busy with movies, as always.
That was an extended segment, opening segment.
Which is fine, because we're going in to talk about ANDHADHUN now, and this movie is such that, like, I really do think that a lot of our conversation is like, we're not going to be able to talk a whole lot about, like, the amazing cinematography or things like, because it's fine, but that's not what this movie, it's not what its strengths are about. So I really think we're just going to be a lot of focus on story elements in this one. But first,
think so, yeah.
Boilerplate. ANDHADHUN was released in 2018. It was directed by Sriram Raghavan. It was also written by Sriram Raghavan, among others. There was actually like 5 writers on this movie. It was inspired by the French short film L'Accordieu, the Piano Tuner, which was about a blind piano tuner who encounters a lot of similar situations to Akash and a lot of self-generated problems that Akash also deals with. That short film is only like 15 minutes, so I do want to go back and watch that because I want to see how much of it they pull directly from that and how much did they stretch to make it into a feature film. Raghavan said that Fargo and the TV series based on Fargo were also sources of inspiration for this movie. Did you guys
see that?
You can see some of that in this?
Well, I mean, so real quick, someone on Twitter after I watched Macbeth said that it's funny seeing Macbeth as a Coen Brothers movie because Macbeth kind of is like a very Coen Brothers character in that he's like a schemer who gets this idea and to like advance himself, and it goes totally wrong because he's kind of incompetent, and like that's what Akash kind of is he's the schemer who's trying to like do some seedy stuff in order to get ahead, and it just like really doesn't go well for him, and he gets in over his head very quickly. That's a pretty classic Coen Brothers kind of character thing, particularly in Fargo. That's like the whole premise of Fargo is guy gets a grand scheme, and it immediately goes horribly because he's not competent enough to pull it off.
And then the rest of it is just trying to dig their way out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I thought that was interesting, and another reason I thought that this might be a fun movie for you guys to watch, given that you guys are big Coen Brothers fans. Another interesting fact that when I was researching the movie, that I enjoyed was that one of the benefits of having 5 writers was apparently that Raghavan and Biswas, who were 2 of the writers on the film, apparently they think in English. And this is not something that I ever think about when I'm looking at a movie and thinking about the way things are written. But they think in English, so the third writer, Surti, had to rewrite a lot of the dialogue because it was going to be released in Hindi. So it made me stop and think about those moments in the movie where they do speak in English, or and how much the translation matters in these scenes. So I really thought that was interesting. Just fun that you have to have a whole separate writer because anytime
India is a complex culture in terms of language. There are so many different languages that are official, depending on which area of the country you're in. People might speak English as their primary language, or they might speak Hindi, or they might speak other languages. And I believe the movie has also been remade in other languages for different parts of India, if I'm not completely wrong on that.
I mean, I know they that's a very common practice, and like when you go on Netflix and you watch a lot of these movies made in India, if you go look at the audio selections, there's usually like 5 or 6 audio options because of all the different Indian languages that they've been redubbed in.
Not to interrupt, but the film has been remade as Maestro in the Telugu language and as Brahman in the Malayalam language, which are 2 languages that are spoken in India. So the movie has been remade with entirely different actors.
Oh, completely remade, not even just a dub.
Yeah, no, okay. Not redubbed, remade with entirely different actors. Same story because of the different areas of the countries where the Hindu version just didn't have the same popularity, which I find fascinating about the country in general.
Yeah. And then some of the other usual boilerplate stuff we talk about. It has an estimated budget of $4.5 million and a worldwide gross of $62.5 million. And that's in US dollars. Not bad.
That's impressive.
Which say the box office was in English dollars, US dollars?
The box office was $62.5 million.
Okay, yeah. Wow.
Anil Dhawan, who plays a formerly popular actor in this movie and a singer, was a Bollywood star. And I'm sure this isn't a surprise to anyone watching the movie, but when they show clips of him, of his old movies and his old musical performances, that's actually him, which which I think is fun because the world is that this movie is taking place is not. Obviously, it's a fiction, and the actor that he is portraying is not him. But I just think it's fun that they're like, well, let's use all your old footage anyways.
Yeah, it's fun.
And the last little factoid from the boilerplate stuff, Khurana, who plays Akash, that's Ayushmann Khurana, did not use a body double for the movie, including the piano scenes. He practiced 4 hours a day on a piano with a piano teacher in Los Angeles. Wow. And then he also visited the National School of the Blind in India to prepare for the role. Which, these are, not unheard of things for people to do for movies, but I'm always impressed by it when, someone, like, people practice their whole lives to become excellent piano players. And this guy's doing it for a role, it's just like when we talked about The Sound of Metal and, learning the drums for that. Riz Ahmed, learning all the drums for that. It's the same sort of deal. I'm just always impressed by that.
Yeah, same.
But let's get into the story. So we are going to... It's basically impossible to avoid spoilers in a discussion of this movie. So I'm just going to put up the spoiler warning now. I'd love for you to keep listening if you haven't seen it, but you could also pause and come back after you have watched it. But the basic premise, and all I told Hugo and Josh about the movie before going into it, is that a blind piano player named Akash is run into by a woman on a motorcycle who, upon finding out that he is a pianist, offers him a gig at a restaurant. At the restaurant, he befriends an older actor who is so impressed by him that he invites him to come play a private concert for him and his wife for their anniversary. And however, in the time between when he gets invited and when he goes to this perform this private concert, we are shown that in fact Akash is not blind. He is faking it, and which is a twist. Which I'd love to. I'm going to ask here in a second about what you guys thought of that moment, but it's a twist to begin with. But it's also a twist that becomes much scarier when he arrives at the performance at the actor's house, only to find that a murder has taken place here, and now he has to play off that he doesn't know what's happening in this room while he continues to play the private performance.
While they drag the body out.
While they drag the body out and all that stuff. So first, all I told you before we watched the movie was about a blind piano player who was a witness to a crime. That's all I told you guys. And I was hoping to avoid the surprise there. What did you think at that moment where it's revealed that Akash is faking it?
I mean, I think it's like probably the most captivating part of the movie for me. Like it's really well done. It's very surprising. I mean, I think I may have looked up, because we talked about this movie a long time ago, and then I was like sitting down to watch it last weekend. It'd been a minute since we talked about it, so I kind of just like read a 2-sentence log line basically to refresh myself, and I think I learned about the murder portion. So I knew that he was going to witness a murder at some point, and I was still very surprised when he walks in that room and he just like sees feet protruding from behind a wall and blood on the floor. But yeah, it was really effective. It got me.
Well, so what did you think about, him faking being blind? Were you surprised by that, or did you, kind of assume that there was going to be more to it since he's witnessing a crime?
I think we learned
the latter,
before though, right?
Yeah, we learned it before he gets to the crime. We learned it before he gets to the crime.
We do see him take out the weird eye thing.
That's like the contact, That's like the 15-minute mark. The 15-minute mark, we learn he's not blind. The 30-minute mark is when we see the murder happens. That's like your inciting incident, end of Act 1 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Hugo.
Sorry. For me, the first half hour, I was utterly confused. I did not know where the movie was going at all. Because he fakes being blind. I was like, okay, he's doing it because he thinks it'll teach him to learn how to play the piano better. And I understand that, but does he have to fake it in front of other people? Why isn't he telling this girl? Like, this girl is about to take her clothes off and he's pretending to be blind. And I understand he moves away, but I was like, what is the inciting incident of the movie? When is that going to happen? And then when the murder happens, I was like, oh, okay, then I understood where the movie was at least starting from. And then there's a whole bunch of different twists in this one, but at least I felt lost before that, and then that moment sort of made me understand what I was in for to some extent. So it did really work. That scene is probably the best scene in the movie for me, at least.
So
I agree.
So before we go more into the plot, I just wanted to touch on that beginning stuff because that's like the setup of the movie. But what I wanted to ask you guys first was your general thoughts on and your film history with Indian cinema. Have you seen a lot of Bollywood or other Indian movies?
No, not really at all. I've seen Slumdog Millionaire, which does not count, but it does. No. It was partially filmed in India and does end with a Bollywood-esque dance number over the closing credits. And I watched The White Tiger last year on Netflix, the Ramin Barani movie, which was also not really a Bollywood movie, but at least takes place in India. But other than that, no.
Same for you, Hugo?
Does Slice of Pie count? I don't think so.
So, I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like, yeah, there's movies that feature Indian culture and Indians, and you know, and there obviously there are Indian people working on those movies. So, like, you know, that's why I specifically said Bollywood or other Indian cinema, because, you know, like we talked about, there are a lot of different regions around India, and not all of the movies are made in Bollywood.
I feel like those movies don't necessarily count just because there's a specific, I think, tone to actual Bollywood Indian cinema that this movie has, and that those movies kind of feature Indian culture, but they're Western movies by all accounts, I would say. So, so I don't really have a history with Bollywood cinema. But
it's a big blind spot for me.
But I know you, Jeff, have seen quite
a few
more,
of them,
right?
Yeah, I've seen. I won't say quite a few, but I've seen some, because during the pandemic, some of my local friends started watching movies, you know, like in a watch party online each week, and we watched several Bollywood films during that time. The most memorable for me of those was Bahubali, which is, you know, and there's two movies in that. It's, you know, two parts, and that movie's about, like, you know, basically a godlike warrior, and it's basically a superhero movie.
Actually, I think I've seen a trailer for
There's
this.
some crazy stuff. That movie is nuts. And so I've seen a few. So I will say I'm starting to, like, pick up on some of the, you know, common themes and ways things are shot and done in Indian cinema. But overall, it's still very new to me as well. So the other thing I want to ask at this time is, what do we think of the movie in general? I alluded earlier that I am aware that this is not like a cinematic masterpiece, and so, like, I'm not expecting you guys to have loved it as much as I do, but I do want to know what you guys think.
Hugo, go ahead.
I was extremely entertained by the movie. Like, I had a great time watching it. Sometimes I wasn't necessarily sure if I was having fun with the movie or at the movie. Like, I think the movie was a bit confusing in terms of tone for me. Like, I felt that I didn't know if at any point I was supposed to laugh or cry. And I felt like sometimes I was, oh, this is funny, but I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be funny or not. I don't know if you understand what I mean, Grizz. Like, there are moments in the film that are dramatic moments, but the way they are portrayed, and I think the editing also does this quite a lot, make them oddly comedic. And
the movie is considered a dark comedy, is what it's building.
I think that's on purpose. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. That's where I'm conflicted on it, because I wasn't always sure which moments I was supposed to be funny and which moments weren't supposed to be funny. But I do think the story is. I think the plot itself is a fun plot. I think that sort of the tonal inconsistencies and maybe some of the distance that I felt, I just felt a little lost sometimes culturally, where, like, showing. Suddenly it just cuts to an older movie, and, like, for 35 seconds we hear an old Bollywood song, and I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, I was a little lost in it. I think it's the kind of movie that if I watched it again, I would have more of an understanding of of sort of the tonal differences and what's intentional, what isn't, and I would enjoy it more, because I really like the plot. I think if I knew where it was going, I would enjoy it even more. But again, overall, I was pretty entertained by it, and I thought it was quite well made.
What did you think, Josh?
I agree that I think it's a excuse me. I think it's a cool plot, and it's a really ingenious idea setup for a movie. A guy who's pretending to be blind witnesses a murder. What now? Like that's great. That's good stuff. More so than the Coen brothers, it reminded me more of like a Guy Ritchie movie, actually.
Yes.
For better or for worse. For better or for worse. In that, like, it's really entertaining and deals with, like, seedy underbellies all over the place and characters getting in over their heads, which, again, is a very Coen thing. But also, like, I feel like Guy Ritchie movies, again, for better or for worse, rely on coincidences. And there's a lot of coincidences in this, both to get the characters into trouble, but also kind of get them out of trouble sometimes, which is like less fun. But yeah, I thought it was good. It kind of goes off the rails for me a little bit in the back half, but we can get to that.
Okay. And obviously, I picked this movie because I really love this movie. And part of it, how I you guys know me. I let the emotional state I'm in affect my enjoyment of a movie. And so the first time I watched this movie, the people, because I was doing a watch party thing, we had the little chat bar on the side where people are typing in their reactions and stuff. And so just that shared, like, communal, like what? No.
It's a good movie for that kind of environment, for sure.
Yeah,
where it's like a lot of twists and turns, and the story kind of just keeps you guessing and stuff. So I want to actually know, like, what was your history with this movie? Like, why you picked this? Why you think this is a film to remember and that kind of thing? Why you wanted us to see this?
Well, the reason I picked it was because when it was suggested for our friend group's watch party, I was like, I'm not familiar with this movie.
So you first saw this in the last couple of years, then?
I saw this last year.
Okay.
While I was still working from home, and no one was going out. We weren't going to movies. We weren't meeting our friends.
Yeah.
So, I said, I'm not familiar with that. And then they said, well, Jeff, because that's what they call me. They say, well, Jeff, aren't you trying to watch all of the IMDb top 250? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, well, it's on there. And so I was like, oh, okay. So
cool. I'm in.
I was like, yeah, okay, I'm sold. Let's do this, because I was going to have to cross it off the list eventually anyways. And then I was so pleasantly surprised by it. Because they didn't tell me basically anything, about the movie. So I got surprised by all the moments that were surprising, and I love a movie that does that to you, that can shock you, and then just when you think you've got it figured out, they shock you again. And so all the other aspects of the movie, the editing and cinematography and all that stuff, they might not be perfect, but I think that for me, the story, the way I received the story, was executed so perfectly that it became a really special movie to me, that and I wanted other people to see it. I wanted other people to get the chance to experience that story as well. And obviously I'm not the only one who thinks so, because
that's awesome. Actually, like, I feel like watching this movie in a group situation would be a lot of fun, and I understand how it would stick with you.
Yeah, I agree.
The way I saw this movie was the same way I first saw The Usual Suspects. I don't know if you guys have seen The Usual Suspects, Hugo.
Of course, I've seen The Usual Suspects.
Which one's The Usual Suspects? Sorry,
Kaiser Sose.
Kaiser Soze, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course I've seen it.
You would know. Just say the name Kaiser Soze and you would know if you've seen it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course I've seen it.
So that movie was another movie that had some pretty big surprises. And it's the sort of movie that, like, I feel like when you get to introduce that to someone else, you get another kind of enjoyment from that movie, getting to hear what their reactions were, or, so like right now, when we're talking about the plot, I get to kind of get that enjoyment of, like, how did you respond to this? Because you want that shared, surprise. But so that's why I picked it. I love this movie, and it's one of these movies that, like, I kind of hope that I want people to know about it, but I hope that they learn about it slowly, so I have more opportunities to show it to other people. Okay, well, so let's talk about the movie itself. I've mentioned the cinematography a few times. The first question I have is, do you think that the quality of the filmmaking lives up to the quality of the story? For me, it doesn't. I think the story is very elevated. But what did you guys think?
I mean, I think I agree with you. I get your point, what you're trying to say, and I think I agree overall. Nothing really jumped out at me in the filmmaking. It's like, oh, that was cool, except for the sound design. A couple moments of like a quick surprising sound when something quick and surprising happens on screen. I think that kind of stuff worked, but other than that, nothing really jumped out at me filmmaking wise.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Jeff. As I said, I think the plot is a lot of fun, and I think in terms just of filmmaking, the parts that confused me about the movies were sort of how slowly that plot gets started. I thought it was very confusing because I think the premise is so strong that I felt it was kind of weird that you actually get to the premise half hour in.
Yeah.
I do think like some editing choices could have been made that like we get 3 full musical numbers of him playing the piano in the bar before we get to the actual plot.
And this is not going to surprise you, Hugo, but that's a staple of Bollywood cinema is musical
numbers.
I
understand that. I get that. And I guess that's why I'm going into the movie not having any sort of notion about Bollywood cinema at all, almost. Like, I understand the musical numbers, but going into this movie, I saw, this is kind of a thriller, drama, dark comedy. So I wasn't expecting that. And I was like, oh, okay, then
it kind of takes you out of it a little bit.
We're doing this now for a few minutes, which is fine. Like, it's not, I don't have anything against it necessarily. I just, in terms of seeing it from a Western point of view, the way it is edited feels a little jarring for me. So, but that being said, again, I did really enjoy when it got going.
Josh?
I want to say this real quick. As I've said before, I'm obsessed with act breaks, but the reason I'm obsessed with act breaks is because they really are instructive in like what the story actually is. So like in this case, if the inciting incident at about the 15-minute mark is revealing that he is blind and faking being blind, and then the half-hour mark taking you into Act 2 is the murder plot, that's telling that like the second act is most of the murder plot, but the overall story is about him faking being blind. And because like the murder plot is, and like the aftermath of it is pretty wrapped up by the end of Act 2, like, this Act 2 is basically him like in danger because he witnessed this thing, and there are these dangerous people who murdered a guy and like want to get rid of all the witnesses. But like, again, that's kind of like done with it when there's still like half an hour, 40 minutes left in the movie. And like, the last act is basically him coming to a decision about his blindness or his faking blindness and that kind of stuff. So like, I'm not sure it doesn't get going until half an hour in. It just, I don't know. Act 1 is Act 1 and Act 2 is Act 2, What do you guys think?
There's a lot of, and this happens, and then
there
this
is a
happens.
Lot, yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of that in this, which is a problem, but yeah.
Right, which I feel like, I almost felt overwhelmed by the movie. I almost felt like I watched a season of television, but compressed into a movie. So I was like, oh, okay, then this new episode is happening about, people trying to take his organs.
Harvest organs,
yeah.
So it's funny you mention that, because one of the first things I thought after seeing this movie the first time was how much I think that this movie would be a fantastic miniseries.
I agree.
And
I think it would really work.
And because there's so many plot twists, you can like when you watch Tiger King, at the end of every episode of Tiger King, you're like, there's no way it can possibly get crazier than this, and then they give you the sting and it's like, oh man, it's going to get way crazier. And that's the same way this movie is. Like at that 15-minute mark, if you were doing it in a miniseries, the reveal that he's not actually blind would be the end of the first episode, and then
probably
and then the end of the second episode is when he walks in on the murder, and then so I feel like it is a lot of and then this happens and then this happens. But if you change the context of those events into a miniseries, then those moments would be at the end of an episode, and then you have a whole week to digest what just happened. And so I agree. It's so interesting, this movie, that when they do kind of like hit you in rapid succession with all these like and then this and then this and then this, then it can be kind of overwhelming. But I think, and maybe this being my second watch, I was able to follow it much more, especially since I knew exactly what was going to happen. That bothered me a little less the second time than it would have otherwise. are you impressed by the acting performances in this movie? Sometimes this is what I run into when I watch a foreign language film, or foreign to me, anyways.
Yeah, language I don't speak.
Yeah, I have sometimes I have a harder time deciding whether or not a performance is good.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, that was gonna be my exact take. I think it's good. It's hard to say though. I'm not really sure.
I thought he was great, and I thought the actress playing his love interest, and I apologize for not remembering the names. She was
Radhika Apte,
quite good.
Simi?
No, that's
Sophie.
Simi's
the murderess.
Yes, played by she has one name, so you know that she's a famous actress. Tabu.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow. I thought she was also great. I didn't always feel like all of the different characters were in the same movie. Sophie feels like a very grounded, realistic character. And then the movie goes crazy places, and some of the characters are a little more over the top. So they don't all completely mesh together with me, but I think the individual performances work really well. And I think Simi in particular is really entertaining to watch.
So
she's sort of mischievous in a fun way.
I'm glad you mentioned that they kind of feel like they're not in the same movie. And to me, that actually works in the case of Sophie, because when Sophie gets told the events, it is utter nonsense. This is absolutely insane because she's from the real world. And people who murder and try to cover up the murder, and people who pretend to be blind and then have to avoid getting caught being blind so that they don't get murdered themselves.
Yeah, and then some poison is given to them and they are suddenly actually blind. So they were lying before, but they're not lying anymore. Or maybe they are. It's like...
So that is so crazy that we're supposed to be like Sophie, I think, as the viewer.
Right.
Which is why I think that character works so well. What, Josh?
I mean, I think to just reiterate what you just said, like everyone in this movie, except for Sophie, is kind of a piece of shit. And like the people, even the people that the people that you don't think would be are, and that's kind of like one of the points of the movie. I think is like even the nice rich actor's wife is a piece of shit, and even the police captain's a piece of shit. Even the nice like lady begging for change on the street ends up being a real piece of shit. And Sophie's like Sophie's the only one who's not, and so like she's living in a different world than the rest of the characters, so it kind of does make sense. I mean, maybe I'm just kind of making excuses for a out of place performance, but it makes sense out of place. I guess.
That's how I felt. Is that Sophie made sense to me, and then like you're right, Hugo. A lot of the other movies, a lot of the other actors in the movie do feel like they're in a completely different movie, and like basically everything that happens while they're in the hospital, that is a whole other movie, and everyone involved in that they're so crazy. No one makes a rational decision.
There are some moments in the movie that become almost slapstick, but then that event, that the way it was portrayed in the movie was slapstick, it then gets treated seriously in terms of plot, and I think that is reflected in the performances as well. But yeah, still, again, the individual parts, very entertaining.
And I did think that Tabu, as Simi, I thought that was a very good performance because she was very fun and maniacal, or even sociopathic. Like when Sophie comes to the door to talk to Akash, and she, having just poisoned him and blinded him, strips down and goes to the door with a towel around her, so that to really screw up Akash's whole world.
She also goes from, we see a scene where, the murder has happened, and she's mad about it, and then she cries about it, and then 5 minutes later she's getting an old lady and throwing her over a banister. Building. And then she goes to his house and she tries to catch him in the act. She's so mischievous, but fun, for sure.
Well, okay, so I'll move on to the next question I have for you about the story. I'm sorry. I had one other thing I wanted to say on cinematography. The one thing that did stand out to me regarding the way this movie was put together, whether it be the cinematography or the editing, just the whole way it was put together, and this is thanks to Josh, I focused on this. The opening scene. So I wanted to ask Josh in particular, what did you think about the opening scene? And just to clarify for those listening, I'm talking about the rabbit in the
There's a cold open of sorts, yes. Well, it opens in media res on a hunter hunting a rabbit in a patch, which is probably a metaphor for what the story eventually is, something being hunted and being pursued. And it cuts away before we see whether or not the hunter shoots the rabbit, and then it cuts to Akash playing the piano, right?
Well, it cuts, it goes to black, and you hear the sound of a car crash. Which we don't know anything about at all. And then it comes up with a quote on the screen, "What is life? It depends on the liver." And then it goes into Akash playing the piano.
I just got that pun. Just now got that pun.
Right?
Wow. Yes. I just now got it.
And the rabbit is blind. Like
that was the other thing.
On the rabbit's eye.
So it's
to notice that it's blind.
And this is something that even on the second time, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's missing one eye, and
but it's missing an eye, but the other one is
looks cloudy.
Get close to it, and it looks cloudy white in the same way that Akash's do when he's wearing the contacts.
So and the rabbit is jumping through the field and hears the hunter, and that's what causes the rabbit to run. And we see the rabbit run into a post in the field, and then it runs out. And that's when it cuts, when the hunter takes a shot at it as it's crossing the street.
I didn't pick up on the fact the rabbit was blind. That kind of sharpens the point about equating the rabbit with Akash in the movie you're about to see. Being hunted and stuff, yeah.
And I felt the same way Josh did when I first saw it, because I was like, wait, what? What does this have to do with a blind piano player?
I was confused. Yeah, I was very confused. Yeah. Yes.
And then and then partway through the movie, I was still thinking about, what did that opening sequence have anything to do with? Is it just setting up the rabbit? The rabbit was blind. Akash is blind. Okay. But then we get to the end of the movie, and then it's like, oh my God, this was not a metaphor?
It's a Deus Ex Machina, not a metaphor. Yeah.
But also, isn't it?
Yeah, but
both. Yeah.
To me, I'm still, speaking of the ending of the movie, which I guess we'll get to in a bit, I'm still unsure what in this movie happened or not. It's like, how much of the movie is Akash being an unreliable narrator, and how much of it actually happened the way that it's shown?
And that's literally my favorite part of the movie is at the end, that discussion you get to have with your friends about, like, okay, what really happened?
Yeah.
So I agreed. I had a similar reaction to Josh, where I was just confused. Hugo, were you confused by the rabbit at the beginning? Or did you pick up on the blindness right away?
I'm still... I did pick up on the blindness, but I'm still confused by the rabbit. It's just like the scene where the rabbit gets shot, where we actually see it, it's such a... It's one of those moments that is such a weird edit. Like, the way it's edited together is 3 quick cuts, and then the car is just flipping. And I was unsure whether it was supposed to be funny or not. That's one of the examples. I was like, wait, this is such a coincidence. I'm not sure if this is actually happening, if it's supposed to be funny, if it's supposed to be taken seriously, but it's funny to me because of the way it's edited together, and I'm still confused by that.
So remember how much you think that's a coincidence when we get to talking about the ending, because I want to. That's important to me later. Okay, well, so just on the story in general, just so we can kind of go through it. What were some moments that really surprised you that you really enjoyed?
Manohar's introduction. I guess they call him Manu in the movie, but his introduction and then reintroduction were 2 moments I really enjoyed. And his introduction is in the, breaking to 2 when Akash stumbles in on this murder scene. He asks Simi, "Can I use the bathroom?" And she leads him and steps him over through the pool of blood and over the dead man's feet and takes him into the bathroom. And it takes a second, but then Akash goes into the bathroom, closes the door, and goes to pee, and then the camera reverses, and you see there's already a man in the bathroom with a gun. And it was extremely surprising and extremely scary, and, is the second time in the last 2 minutes that Akash has had to hold in a reaction. First seeing a dead body, second seeing a man with a gun in the bathroom. And that really worked. And then that same character comes up again about 15 minutes later when Akash goes to the police station to try to report the murder that he just witnessed, and lo and behold, that guy's the police captain.
Yeah.
And, also extremely effective reveal.
And again, Akash has to pretend to not recognize him.
yes, because the guy overhears Akash telling this other policeman what happened, and then he walks in the room, does not announce himself, and Akash has to pretend he doesn't see him, and then also kind of make up a different story because he can't tell the one he's about to tell.
He comes in, he says, I'm here to report a murder. And so, of course, the guy recognizes his voice and comes out to see Akash, and then Akash is immediately like, my cat.
My cat was murdered. Yeah, tough beat.
Yeah, I love that moment where Manohar is revealed in that, because that's very much a almost a horror movie type of shot where the camera pans over and he's in the room, and so that really surprised me.
It's so well done as well because it holds on him going to pee first, and you as the audience member are like, why is he still pretending to be blind? The door is shut.
Why hasn't he taken his glasses off and freaked out yet? His little mini freak out.
He's just pretending still. She can't hear that he's not blind. That's weird. And the camera slowly pans over. It's really well made.
Yeah. So that is one of those moments where I'm like, that's actually pretty good cinematography. The way that was all
absolutely
that was
put together there. But
well staged.
I love that one, and then the final moment is excellent as well.
I mean, the very last thing that happens before the credits roll is certainly a surprise and meant to be, but
so
good stuff.
I see in our notes, Hugo, I asked what moment surprised you, and you said too many to list. I kind of got lost after a bit.
I think it's the same thing as before. A lot happens in this movie, and so I feel like I remember individual scenes, and I almost don't know how they all fit together. I kind of have a hard time figuring out how we go from, she's in his house trying to get him, and then there's organ harvesters, and then he's in Italy, and that. A lot of different things happen, but I think we already mentioned a lot of some of the surprising parts. So we already talked about them, but I guess if we were talking about our favorite parts of the movie, I would certainly say most of the actually comedic parts are my favorite.
Yeah, and I see I kind of asked the same question twice here in our notes, but so we can kind of touch on it. The scenes or sequences that you enjoyed as well.
For me, there are three things of comedy that are my favorite. First, the little boy that is trying to, because that sees that he's actually not blind, and so that spends the rest of his time trying to catch him in the act of pretending to be blind, and he makes a video, and then Simi deletes it from his phone, and he's trying to swindle people into giving him money for seeing the video. I thought that was really funny. Simi killing the old lady, which I mentioned before. It's another really weird edit where in 3 seconds there are 4 shots, and it's Akash going into the elevator, the old lady comes out to talk to Simi, and then we cut back to Akash coming out of the elevator, and we see the old lady we don't see Simi flip the old lady over the rail. We see the old lady already halfway through, falling through the rail, and then Beethoven plays, ta-da-da-da. So that was really good. And also there's later when Simi goes to his house and tries to catch him, at one point, for some reason, she wears a ghost face mask, and the movie does a strong, loud sound, like a weird
also
jump
very
scare.
Surprising, yes.
Yeah, and she, it just, the camera moves, and Akash is still having to pretend like everything's normal, but to the audience, there's a really loud noise, and we see her in a ghost face mask, which is really funny. So those parts, I think, are
I think that ghost face thing is so funny, because
I was like, why did they think of this specifically? It's so specific.
I don't know why Ghostface, and I don't think I will ever know why specifically Ghostface.
Like,
but I think the idea was like a scary mask that to put on quickly when Akasha's turn, because she's just trying to break him. Like she thinks he can see, and this isn't the first time like someone's tried to get him to break, because we see Captain Manohar goes to his apartment, is in the apartment when he gets home, and then starts like throwing stuff at him, like throws a knife past his head to see if he flinches. And honestly, that is the moment where I'm like, regardless of whether or not I understand the language, I was impressed by Ayushmann Khurrana's performance, because even as an actor, not flinching when someone throws a knife past your head has got to take so much control. And
I mean, maybe they did 15 takes.
Yeah, maybe. But like even like just to not even flinch, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm just impressed on a human level, not on an acting level, just on a human ability to not flinch. I thought that was really cool.
Well, Hugo mentioned that scene, the scene where Simi visits Akash because of the screen mask jump scare, but I think that scene in general is really good and like one of my favorites, because it's one of the most tense, where like Akash still knows he's in danger because he's a witness to a murder, and he watched her kill one of the other witnesses to the murder, and she's trying to figure out, as you guys said, she's trying to break him and see if he actually is blind, and like just the push-pull of that scene and how things are revealed and multiple things are revealed, I think is really well done. It's one of the highlights of the movie.
I think that's the high point of the film for me as well, because after that we get this plot point.
It goes a little off the rails for me as well.
We get this
after
plot point where she gives him
I agree.
some poison that makes him blind.
So the poison doesn't make him blind.
Doesn't it?
The poison knocks him out.
I thought it did.
No, the poison knocks him out, and then she does something that makes him blind. We don't actually see what she does.
We don't actually see it, so you can understand why it was confusing to me.
Yes, I completely understand.
Okay.
Right.
That confused me.
I also thought it was the poison.
The poison was to knock him out, and then the doctor later says that like, oh yeah, your corneas are damaged. The poison didn't damage his corneas. She like did something to his corneas.
Right.
So and he could tell that the wounds were fresh. So that's again something I didn't pick up until my second time through, because I thought that it was the poison made him blind. I'm like, do they have that? Is that a thing? A poison that makes you blind?
Yeah, I was thinking about that for 15 minutes.
I mean, probably.
I mean, it could be, but still.
I mean, I learned this in my biochemistry class, not from real life experience, but the major ingredients in Viagra can cause blindness, which is why if you're taking Viagra and experience blurred vision, you gotta go see a doctor immediately.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm assuming there is a pill that can make you blind.
A pill that can make you blind.
But like, is it readily available to just some lady to make a cake?
This lady has means. She's first of all, she's boning the police captain, and two, she's very rich. So if anybody can get it, she can.
That's true. Point taken.
One of my favorite moments in the movie that, again, I think you almost don't realize what it is until it's over, when the police are interviewing him, and he stands up suddenly and says, "I'm not blind. They're murderers." All that. And for a second, I'm like, "Oh my God!" He revealed it. Now what's going to happen? And then it cuts, and it's one of those like, it was in his head. This is what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grizz, here's another question. Why didn't he do that? Because he's pretending to be blind for his piano, but he's not doing anything technically illegal, or like, I don't know, or is he? That's where I'm confused. Like, because he could just say, "Oh look, I can see. I saw this murder, and let's stop these guys." Is he worried that Sophie will get mad at him, which she does anyway? But like,
so I think that's part of it, was that he was worried that because at that point Sophie didn't know that he wasn't blind. So there's the worry about like the rest of his life is going to fall apart, and he's going to London to compete in this competition, a competition that he probably got into in no small part because of his story of being blind. So I think that he doesn't do that because he is trying to find a way out of this that doesn't derail everything that he has had planned for his life. And this is also important because we are going to find out that Akash is relating this story to Sophie at the end of the movie. And so is he an unreliable narrator? Well, he says that the reason he was pretending to be blind was because he thought it would make him better at being better at playing the piano. But I think that you can kind of read between the lines and see the kind of person that he is, that he's pretending to be blind because it makes him interesting and, makes people care more about when he's playing the piano. It gives him a leg up on things. So I think that's an example of, Akash being an unreliable narrator. Right. And another thing about this movie that is open to your personal interpretation. Sorry. But yeah, so those were some of my favorite moments. It's the part that is the weakest to me, and I think it sounds like it's the weakest to you guys as well, is the whole sequence in the hospital. Yeah. Where he runs into... He's now blind. He gets picked up by the cabbie that drove him the other day.
Yeah. Who happens to just be part of this organ harvesting racket or something.
Right. So again, this is one of the things that I'm going to ask about is, this movie being kind of hand-wavy at times.
Right.
He gets picked up and is and is going to have his organs harvested by these people. So absolutely nuts. And
yes,
is again like a big coincidence. And so that's what I wanted to ask. As much as I love the plot, and so I kind of forgive some of these things. I forgive a lot of these things because of how wild it is and how much fun I'm having with it. For you guys, did it become too hand wavy to fully enjoy it? And when I say hand wavy, I mean don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't think too much about this thing.
Yeah, I guess especially in that second act, as I said, the high point of the movie is that second act until the moment where he actually becomes blind. I think that whole middle part of the film works really well for me and is really entertaining. And then it kind of becomes coincidence after coincidence and just things happen. And, he meets these people who he's met before who happen to be organ harvesters. And then they happen to believe him when he says, oh, but actually I know this and we're going to make money out of ransom because of it. And then
he does prove that he could see before.
That is true. But then they meet Simi again. I mean, they kidnap Simi, and then Simi gets out, and then the policeman finds them, and then there's the car sequence, and then he goes to another country, and Sophie just happens to walk in. I do feel like the movie doesn't do a lot of work to get to the next plot point. I feel like they have an idea of where we're going, and so we're just going to do it.
We just go.
And so as I said before, I think doing a mini-series maybe where you flesh out all the different parts could have made it more, believable and wouldn't have taken me out of it too much.
Let me list the coincidences that I kind of strained my credulity a bit. Number one, the fact that he walks into this murder is a pretty big coincidence.
Right.
Granted, that's not that big of a deal, though, because every movie is kind of granted one big coincidence to get the story going, and that's the one. Yeah. That's the one in this case. The second coincidence is that he witnesses Simi kill the old lady, the other witness. He just walks out of the elevator as she's doing it, and I'm not sure what that coincidence even does for the story. It doesn't I don't know. Whatever plot it gives you, which I think isn't much, isn't worth the incredulity of the. Of the massive coincidence. Grizz, what do you got on that one?
On that one, I think you can justify that coincidence. Again, he has a reason for being there. He's coming to teach piano.
Yes.
So, but the purpose of that narratively is this is the moment that Simi now, she is like you. There's no way this is a coincidence that he keeps showing up right when something like this happens. There's something going on here, and that's when she becomes suspicious of him.
But also, on his side, it kind of makes him understand that she didn't just kill her husband by accident, and that's what happened, but she's also willing to sort of murder anyone who might have a clue, but it does just so happen that he walks out of the elevator exactly on that moment.
Akash learning about the old woman's death still gives you that. The fact that he learns the other witness mysteriously died suddenly, like, he doesn't have to witness her murdering him for him to connect that dot.
It is
another
funny.
coincidence.
It is a funny moment, though.
It is funny.
Again.
Like you said, Hugo, the coincidence of, like, the guy who happens to pick him up after he runs into a pole and knocks himself unconscious is an organ harvester. I think that kind of, like, they do a good job of setting up a third act for that, but, like, still. And then, obviously, the final coincidence is the Deus Ex Machina of the rabbit in the car.
The rabbit, oh, yeah.
Yes.
And, like, those are all pretty major story points to kind of just hand wave away with the coincidence, I think. Like, you lose me a little bit towards the end there.
Okay. Well, so I'm just going to say real quick about the music, because that's the other big highlight of Bollywood, movies, is the music. I really love that, and so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but because we did kind of talk about how it took Hugo out of it a little bit when they cut to those. They didn't include any dance numbers in this, which is a thing. Is they usually have a full-on dance number where everybody dances. If they had done that, would that have been a bridge too far? Like, even if it was just at the credits, they did a dance number?
I wouldn't mind a credits dancing.
I would have been on board.
Maybe wouldn't fit with the tone, maybe, but
I would have been on board for the credits dance number, personally.
I would rather have got a dance sequence than 3 separate piano-playing song sequences.
Yeah, okay.
So,
well, that's fair.
Yeah,
I like the music, though. I do think it's very catchy and good music. But, so...
I will say, though, okay, when they're at the funeral, the music that he's playing does not sound like... Maybe I'm just not in tune with Indian culture, obviously, but it does not sound like funeral music. It's kind of upbeat, and I was like, oh, okay.
I think it was the song that he had requested.
Yeah, it must have been, but it was still... Because I don't know the song and I don't make that connection musically. I'm like, oh, okay, the tone of this is... But still, yeah, it's not a big deal again. So,
let's go into the ending. This is, absolutely insane. Beginning to end here. So, the movie ends with Sophie going to Europe. And I say Europe because they literally just say on the screen, somewhere in Europe... Which Hugo takes issue with. Hugo, why do you have a problem with that?
It's just Italy. Like, I understand if you want to say somewhere in Europe and it's a nondescript European-looking city, that's fine. But, like, everyone knows what Italy looks like. People speak Italian in this scene. They are sitting at a bar drinking an espresso. Like, it's just Italy. Just say Italy. I don't understand why they choose to say somewhere in Europe when... Italy is a recognizable place. Yeah. Just say somewhere in it. I just don't get it.
Like, it's not funny, like it was somewhere in Siberia or something.
Yeah, right. Like it was somewhere in I don't know,
Nebraska,
in North. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So that is weird. But so she goes. Yeah. She's in Europe for reasons, and she happens to see a sign that Akash is performing nearby. As a blind pianist. And at this point, she is still of the mind that Akash is not blind. And so, she goes to see him. And he asks her to get something to eat with her after his performance. And so they go sit down and he tells her this story. And so he tells her about he got picked up by the organ harvesters and how they captured Simi and how the doctor was going to kill her to harvest her organs to sell to a sheik, and then give the money from that sale to Akash so that he could get his eyesight back. But then she escapes from the trunk of the car and kills the doctor, which I love that shot, actually, when the lid closes.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
The doctor bleeding out of his neck. She gets into the car without saying a word to Akash, and they begins to drive away, and Akash says, no, we can't do this to her. We can't do this. It's wrong. And
not realizing he's talking to her, not the doctor.
Right. And then she finally speaks and tells him to get out, and she begins to drive away, and she turns around. She's going to run over Akash. And of course, he doesn't know what's happening because he's blind at this point. And just at that moment, the rabbit from the beginning of the movie leaps out and crashes into the windshield of the car, causing Simi to flip the car and die, leaving Akash on the street, still blind.
He's alone, isn't he?
Yeah, he's alone.
I guess the hunter is
the
there.
Hunter's nearby.
Noticed this blind man, but still, he's just standing there.
So Sophie listens to this story, and they're going to go their separate ways. And she looks at him like this story is insane, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I know it's insane."
Yeah.
And so then they go their separate ways, and he walks down the street, tapping in front of him with his walking stick, his cane. And important to note that the cane has a rabbit for the handle, because they make sure to show that to you. And as he's walking, he's tapping the street in front of him, and then there's a can in his way, and he flicks it out of the way with the cane.
As if he could see the can.
As if he could see the can in the street.
Yes.
So, I got asked the questions that you ask at the end of this movie. Did Akash lie to Sophie? First, so do we think he can see that can?
Yes. I think we're intended to believe he can see the can.
Unless
and I agree with that.
He has become Daredevil, he can see the can.
Or, and this is what one of my friends says, like, well, no, maybe all that was true, and he has become a successful musician, and and bought the eye treatment, so now he can see again. And it's not he didn't do anything.
He can see.
Yeah, so like my friend thinks that he can see, but doesn't believe there was anything malicious that happened to let him be able to see again.
The question you posed, did he lie to Sophie? Yes, to an extent, but we're not sure. We need to discuss to what extent he lied to Sophie.
Right.
Because he's clearly see.
Was
but
he ever
why
blind
can't
in
he
the
see?
first place? That's another question for me.
This is what I was going to say earlier.
I'm sure he was blind in the first place. Yeah.
Right.
But
I would think so at least.
But was he? Because
I don't know.
One thing we know for certain is that Akash is not a reliable narrator. Mm-hmm. And we have been told this story. We've just seen the story as he's told it to Sophie. So all that stuff that happened in the hospital, we don't know if any of that actually happened.
Yeah.
And, so we don't know how far back the lying begins in this story.
To me, when I saw him like kicking away, I mean not kicking, but hitting the can away, it made me question any scene in the movie where Sophie wasn't in it. I was like, okay,
and that's what I think is so fun about this.
How much of this is true?
Because now you can go back and you have to think through the whole movie, how much of this isn't true? Or is it all true except for the very end? And you're left wondering through the entire time just how much of this is fabrication. So, like, do you think that he and the doctor did what the doctor wanted to do and killed Simi to get his eyesight back?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. Like, the thing for me is this can be either a strength or a weakness of the film overall. Because if it is completely intentional and well, I mean, obviously it is intentional, but I'm wondering whether the writers know exactly what is true and what isn't in their minds, or if they just wanted to add a final twist on top of all the twists that we've seen before, just because it's like, oh, a cool twist at the end. And it left me confused again. I feel like, again, I've said this a bunch of times, I feel like watching the movie again, I would have a lot of fun trying to figure out how much of it is true, how much of it isn't.
What do you think, Josh?
I think that the one moment where we see him, like, what's going on inside his head, which is like him confessing that he's not blind to the police and fingering Simi and Manohar for the murders, that's like the one brief moment where there's a suggestion that, like, what we're seeing isn't actually happening. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that one scene is enough to convince me that more of it isn't happening. I think that if he is lying and is an unreliable narrator, at least in terms of, like, the way the movie constructed and, like, the cinematic language, like, it's only the last bit. It's only, like, the car crash. Yeah, like the car crash, and maybe even the doctor being killed by Simi, maybe that part as well. But like everything before that, I take to be like
that happened,
an actual thing that happened. Otherwise, why do we care?
Yeah.
Like if anything could be like not real, then what's the point of us even watching this?
So my answer to that question is the point is the discussion that you have to have about whether or not any of it's real, and I think that is maybe not everyone's going to be satisfied with that, but I think that's an interesting approach to telling a story, is telling you this whole crazy story, and keep in mind we've acknowledged that there's a bunch of really bizarre coincidences, like
right.
and then this happens and then this happens, and I start to think about every time I've been told a story by a liar, and how wow, and then this crazy thing happens. Really? Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. You can't make this up. And so I started thinking.
Okay, I guess, but I don't know. Like
that's very Life of Pi again.
This isn't. Well, yeah, that's constructed though as someone telling the story. Yeah. And it kind of does implicitly acknowledge at the end like what is and isn't true, and kind of gives you like that's kind of like the whole point of that movie. Like Jacob's Ladder, the whole point of Jacob's Ladder is that it was all like taking place inside his head, that kind of stuff. And like this doesn't feel like that, minus like the very brief moment where we see that he has a vision of how things could go, but then does something else. So. I don't know. I guess that is fun to discuss, but like this isn't Inception. It's not Jacob's Ladder. It's not any of those things. So I don't know. I don't know. I think most of it actually happened, and my only question is whether or not how he came to be seeing again is my question. Right. And I think that this is ultimately a morality play, in that like people who do bad stuff. Get bad things befalling them, and the innocents among the cast, which is basically only Sophie, bad things don't happen to her, and she's like the only person that bad things don't happen to. That too, yeah, I guess. But like Manohar is foiled by his own gun and is killed by his own, over eagerness to shoot his gun. Simi gets hers, the organ harvesters get theirs, and even like Akash, who is pretending to be blind, is punished for that by becoming blind himself eventually. So like I guess the only like my question at the end is like, not to sound glib, but like why do I care? Whether he can see or not. And I guess the only answer for that is it invites you to consider how he came to get these eyes and what that means for him moving forward, giving this world where bad things happen to people who do bad things. Yeah. So what's next for Akash? And that's dependent on, did he do something seeded to get these eyes, in which case bad things are his future, given everything we've seen before this? Or did he, I don't know, find a dead body somewhere and take I don't know. Well, yeah, or just have a doctor treat his eyes. I don't know.
My friend, who was very optimistic, believed that everything happened in this movie, but then
I agree.
But then that Akash just went on and became a successful blind pianist, and then got his eyes fixed, and then didn't continue to lie about being blind. And that was,
that could be, that's the most optimistic interpretation. Right. I think that's possible.
Well, still, but we're not supposed to be completely on Akash's side, right?
Right.
By the end. So
no,
I don't think he's a good guy at all. So I don't know. I do understand the idea of wondering why should I care, because ultimately it's his story, and at the end we're with him. Oh, cool! He has his eyesight back, and because I don't necessarily think he's a positive character, I'm kind of left with a twist that is just a cool twist, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I had this early in the outline. I didn't mention it yet. One of the hand-wavy parts for me is like his explanation of why he's pretending to be blind. Right. That just... We don't get that explanation till the midpoint when like Simi is poisoning him. So like we go over an hour before we learn why he's pretending to be blind. And it doesn't seem like enough of an explanation. He says he's just doing it because like it makes him better at piano, and as you said, Grizz, like it makes him more sympathetic to people watching him play the piano. But like that's a big commitment to pretend to be blind anytime you're in public just to get that. I don't know. It seems like a lot.
To me, I'm wondering, is he getting like government housing and income? Like, is that a part?
He does say that he is actually. Yeah, right. Yeah. I think he did say that at one point. Yeah.
That's the extra reason why he's not willing to like share the fact that he's
because he would definitely go to prison.
I mean, not prison necessarily, but he would be fined heavily. I guess.
So
I'm not sure.
I guess the end point where he's still pretending to be blind, but isn't actually blind. Like, I guess I'm not sure how to feel about that because I'm never really sure how to feel about him pretending to be blind in the first place. Like, I don't think it's a good thing that he's doing it, but like, I don't really understand his rationale, and so like, I don't really understand this character. And so it's hard for me to come to a conclusion about him once the conclusion happens, I guess. So is my biggest thing.
I think it's difficult. Part of like for me, a lot of the fun is how open ended this is. And the director did say that he has said that he wanted he wanted an open ended ending. And it's funny to me. Like I asked, is it open ended enough? I can tell from our conversation that it's way open ended for you guys still.
Absolutely.
But it's so interesting because other people I've watched this with, they thought it was very clear, and so
right.
I think that's what's kind of fun about this is because I could have a conversation with that person who thought it was very clear, and give them all the reasons why I think it's not clear, and still arrive at different conclusions at the end, which is fun, kind of in a similar way, not the exact same way, but a similar way to Under the Silver Lake, which we talked about. In our very first episode of this
good movie
of the show, where like there's a lot about that movie that doesn't get an explanation, and half the fun is trying to figure out where you come down on that story. And I think that's what makes this interesting. So regardless of should you care about Akash, not necessarily, but should you care about how you feel about what happened? Yeah, I think that. So for me, I think that's kind of the point. So again, I think that's why if you can get into that mindset, like I did, then that's why I love this movie. But if you are wanting a more defined narrative conclusion, or even like the hint of a narrative conclusion, then this is going to leave you wanting. And I think that's what happened more with you guys.
When I'm saying if I wasn't Akash's side, if I cared more about Akash, I would care more about the open-ended ending. You know what I mean? Like I think open-ended conclusions work best when Inception does the top stop spinning or not. Yeah. I care because I care about Cobb and I care about his family thing, and there's also a narrative about it does it even matter whether it's a dream or not.
That's the camp I'm in, yeah.
That's why I care about that twist ending. But if I didn't have an attachment to that narrative, then it's just like, oh, cool twist, but
so
what are you trying to tell me is what I'm missing, I guess.
What I think about this is that you're watching the movie under the impression that, and this is how I watched it as well, you're under the impression that the character you are following is Akash, and that you are seeing the world through Akash's eyes, or eyes.
No pun intended. Yeah.
But in reality, you are Sophie,
right?
And so the person that you're in Sophie's shoes, which is why you don't ultimately have that attachment to Akash. I think at the end because
And again, I think it's the shift in perspective would make a rewatch more interesting because I know where it's going, so I'm looking for different things. But on a first watch, my instinct is try to find an emotional attachment to the main character.
To Akash, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think that's very interesting, and and
no,
for me,
it's definitely
maybe that's why I love it so much is because I think that these meta,
a really fun movie to talk about.
You're looking at this movie from above, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is very interesting about this movie.
Yeah.
And so for me, that makes a lot of the flaws of the actual movie. I'm able to overlook those, but I think this is one of those times where. Josh and Hugo are much better at approaching movies from a critical perspective than I am, and so
I don't necessarily think that's true at all.
I guess what I should say is I think that you don't let your own emotions necessarily sway you as much on a first watch.
I mean, look at my personal film to remember list, and you will see The Matrix Reloaded in the top 10. So that's not true at all.
Okay, I suppose that's true.
I just think I think it just depends on what you go into movies looking for, and I think everyone watches things way more individually than they think, and you attach yourself to things that I think plot mechanics, Grizz, are something that you really attach yourself to and enjoy in movies. And and maybe for me the intricacies of the plot aren't always what I necessarily look for, or aren't the thing that grounds me into the world of the movie that is presented.
Basically what it boils down to is we weigh things differently.
Exactly.
Josh.
So
yeah. I think what Hugo's trying to say is I personally like when character drives plot. Right. And in this, I think plot drives character.
Yes.
You know?
Yep, that's a really good way to summarize it, Josh. Okay, well, so let's go ahead and give our rankings here to wrap up this week. I'll go ahead and give my ranking. Obviously, like I said, I love this movie, but I am not delusional.
Again, our film to remember list has some heavy hitters on here. That's just like a fact of life.
So for me, I rank ANDHADHUN at 27 on our list, just after Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which, as we've already established, is one of my favorite movies.
Right.
Yes, it is. And I put it at number 36, just behind 33, 34, 35 is Trial of Chicago 7, Matrix Reloaded, Sweeney Todd, and then I put it right above Space Jam and Slither. So, which are two movies I really enjoy.
I was going to say, again, I like Space Jam and I like Slither as well, but I think that's one of those lines in our list where, like, okay, there's a different kind of movie.
I think that, like, it's going to be hard for a movie to crack, like, the top 10 moving forward, and I think it's also going to be hard for a movie to crack the bottom 10 pretty much. So I think everything's going to go. I think Space Jam's the line. Space Jam is the Mendoza line there moving forward.
Okay, and where do you got it, Hugo?
I would put it one spot higher. I would put it below The Matrix Reloaded, above Sweeney Todd. I think that I would enjoy this movie more on a rewatch, and I think talking about the movie is a lot of fun. So,
did you watch this with Julia the first time?
I did not. No.
Well, there you go. That's your rewatch. Watch it with the girlfriend.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah.
So we have our rankings at 27, 35, and 36. That averages out to 32.6 repeating. So does that mean we put it at 33?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So below Mank.
And above The Trial of the Chicago 7. Which Hugo's, I think, a little bit on board for. He loves when things are higher than Trial of the Chicago 7.
I'm down with that, yeah, absolutely.
All right, there it is, number 33.
So
behind Chef, Another Round, and Mank.
And then ANDHADHUN. So, that's it for this week. What are we watching next week?
Guys, I am so freaking excited for what we're going to watch next week. We're going to watch Adaptation, directed by Spike Jonze, written by Charlie Kaufman, starring Nicolas Cage, Chris Cooper, and Meryl Streep. And what's funny is, so like I have a list of films to remember that I want to cover at some point. It's a long list, and at this point, I picked this like almost 2 months ago, and I was looking at the list thinking like, okay, what's relevant right now that could be fun to talk about. And the reason I picked this is because a Nick Cage trailer came out. I can't remember what the movie's called, but he basically plays himself in a movie coming out, and like
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Oh yeah,
like
yes,
I saw
that's correct. Yes, thank you. So that trailer came out, and I'm like, I was thinking about Nick Cage. I'm like, okay, let's do Adaptation and do like a Nick Cage centered episode. But then like multiple things happened in the intervening 2 months that make this conversation even more relevant. Number one, Matrix 4 came out, which we will talk about why Matrix 4 is relevant to the movie Adaptation. And number two, and Don't Look Up, Meryl Streep plays a character named President Orlean, and in Adaptation she plays a character named Susan Orlean, which I can't imagine is a coincidence. I'm sure they were nodding to Adaptation there with naming her character. So, if you haven't seen Adaptation, I think it was on Hulu or something, but holy cow, I'm so excited to talk about it with you guys. It's going to be a really fun episode. So, Adaptation, tune in next week.
Okay.
Awesome.
And as always, please follow us at RTF Pod. I swear we're going to start tweeting out of there sometime. And then
I'll tweet this week.
And then
I'll do some tweets.
And then you can follow me at Good Game Grizz. I'm also on twitch.tv/GoodGameGrizz. I'd love for you to follow me there. And I'd also really, really like for some people to follow me on Letterboxd. Because I've been writing a lot of reviews, and I think they're pretty solid.
Do.
And Josh and Hugo follow me, and they haven't unfollowed me yet, so it must be okay.
Okay, Grizz, you had a line in your review of ANDHADHUN that our mutual friend Islam showed me, because he was like, the line says, "It's best to go in blind."
Yeah, isn't that brilliant?
This movie. It was great. We had such a laugh about it. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Boo.
No, it was brilliant. You can find me at Hugo_Pinay on Twitter, and you can find me at Hugo Pinay on Letterboxd. And I am going to be a regular monthly guest on Large Popcorn Podcast, which I mentioned before. Christian is going to do like a movie club thing where he has some of his audience vote on movies that we're going to watch, and we're going to talk about them once a month. The first movie is Thirst by Park Chan-wook, which is a really creepy, weird film.
Sweet.
Josh.
You can find me on Twitter at the Sloop Josh B, new handle, trying it out. On YouTube, Movies I Love, So Can You. I posted a video on the Birdcage last month that no one's watched, but thank you to the 6 of you who have. Go watch that.
Okay. Well, so that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us on Remember the Film. We'll see you next time for Adaptation.
Woo, 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 woo. See you guys.